All right, great. Welcome back. So it's 7 minutes past 7 a.m. on this beautiful, beautiful Tuesday morning. So we are here. Let's talk about politics, and basically that's how it is. We consume politics on a daily basis. And before we started the show, Regina was giving a breakdown on matters inflation. But I have a feeling she didn't finish to give us the full details of what inflation is all about and how it affects you as Mwananchi. I'm so sure it has to be continued. Regina, are we okay? Okay. Yes. Regina will have to continue that. Let's continue this. So in studio I have Wakili George Kithi joining me on set. Wakili, good morning, and good to see you as well.
Good morning, thank you, and good morning, and good morning, Kenya.
Yes, last time we were here, we were talking about the issue of states and elections. Our prediction, it went the way it went.
Yes.
And we have a new president for now.
Yes.
What do you make of that? Let me start from where we left last week, then come back home.
Oh yeah, thank you. The U.S. elections, we have a president-elect who I think is going to be sworn in January.
Yeah.
He's in the process of putting in his government, basically, his cabinet and other appointees, including ambassadors. I've heard the Kenyans have written a letter on the same, on some preferences here and there. Of course, that constitution of the government is a prerogative of the president-elect, Donald Trump. It was a historical issue because that's an astronomical comeback. He made a comeback in a way that is not contestable because it's not a close mark as between him and Joe Biden the last time, or him and Clinton when he was doing his first term. So he, of course, beat Clinton, and then he was beaten by Biden by small margins, but not the one that is there now because he beat Kamala Harris, probably the bigger margin than expected. Actually, it was expected it's going to be thinner than it happened because of the predictions. But it looks like towards the tail end, he was seen as the Mr. Fix-It for many things. Issue of immigration is a big issue there because every day there's an influx of people, foreigners, taking up jobs from the Americans, and basically what they call themselves as adulterating the community in terms of, people pay taxes, toil to pay tax and build their government, but the benefits are spread all over, including to foreigners. And it will happen to any other country. Take, for instance, at the border with Somalia, then the Somalis probably have a war or whatever they have, then they move in. We had that catastrophe, we had that problem when we had when we were hosting Somalis probably in the north at the camp as refugees. And they came to Nairobi, they were all over town. And at a point there was a hue and outcry because they have to go back on account of we can only host a certain number. So immigration is a bigger issue, like any other country would. So we understand from that perspective. The issue of economy, yes, it's doing better because the inflation is at its lowest ever in the US. But it looks like there is no confidence in the continuity of management of the economy. He looks like the Mr. Fix-It in the manner in which he presented himself. And of course, lastly, we have the international policies. More importantly, the younger generation looking at and voicing concern about the war, especially in Gaza, between the Palestine and Israel. That became an issue. Looks like Biden was not decisive. So decisiveness, he was seen as a decisive character needed for the president of US. And then looking at his term and Biden's term, or the Democrats and the Republican term, during his term there were no wars because he seemed to be flexing his muscle against any aggression by any state. In fact, Russia did not attempt to attack any country, including Ukraine at them, even if it had the plans. During Biden's time, yes, it is. So, yes, the cocktail of character, it's more of the character issue. He wasn't the best. Because, of course, there is the issue of the reproductive health. It was a big issue, but looks like that didn't take the center stage as opposed to the economy one and immigration.
But we have to give it to Kamala Harris, because coming almost towards the tail end of the presidency of Biden and getting whatever she got, that was a great performance, and history already made. So probably if she comes back in the next round of elections, we can give it to her.
You see, campaign is an interactive process.
Yeah.
I'll tell you because I have a personal experience on that issue of Kamala Harris. The time when I was coming for the position of senator back home, and then 3 months or so, or 4 months, I converted the position of governor. Now, my character was dominantly that of a Senate candidate. Then towards the tail end, you want the character of a governor candidate. You see, positions are characterized. The characteristic comes because of the socialization and the national psyche or general psyche to the population that is affected over time, because you keep on repeating over time. So then they relate you with that position. Once that happens, it is impossible, completely impossible sometimes to change it. Biden was obviously the dominant character of the candidacy or candidature of the Democrats for a very long time. Then towards the tail end, Harris assumes that character. Now, to have that character as the dominion over the population for a long time was going to take some time.
Yeah.
It needed the citizen to get involved with that until such a time when the marketing is enough for the citizen to turn from Biden as a competitor, as a dominant character to Harris. So the dominant character in terms of marketing is basically to continuously imbue, inform, cajole, seduce the population into the character element in the mind. And relating solutions with the character, because it's a question of that character versus the solutions that are needed for the problems of the society.
Yes.
Now, because that happened, because the other way, of course, was to try and panel beat Biden towards a dominant character as to beat Trump, but that was going to be fearsome because he had done very poorly in the debate, the last debate with Trump. And therefore, when Kamala Harris came in, it's going to be impossible, I mean, to, get into the deepest part of society, convince society that Harris. Remember, Trump had been the presidential candidate right from after election. In fact, after the insurrection, where he went and caused commotion in parliament and whatever it was, the trial, he was always somebody talked about. He went through a trial, he went through a conviction, he went through an appeal. He was always the issue, the candidate. Remember, in politics, it's not about bad publicity. It's about publicity. Continuously, incessantly, dominantly,
you have to be there.
The character has to continue to be put into the people out there. Back home, President Ruto, William Ruto, started his campaign immediately. They got the second term with President Uhuru Kenyatta. That was criticized, yes, because obviously the nation has to heal, and fast forward is that something has to be done in terms of building the nation. But as a personal, as a persona to the people, you need to continue relating to them. Was it in church, sports, whatever? Because there's the youth, there's the women, there's this, there's this. Then there's the ethnic diversity, the Turkanas, the Dorobos, the Giriamas, the Wardeis, the Kikuyus. Until such a time Mlima ticks, until such a time Mulembe nation ticks, the Luo nation ticks, every time, dominantly. If you do that, then there's character dominance. So I think elections are putting out your character out there and making dominant, relating to the solutions of the problem facing the people. And Harris didn't have that.
That reminds me of...
Basically, if I think she had more time, she would have... Then, remember, journalism and media is very important. When Harris used it very well, but I think she was not used to the interaction with the media as such, because you need to know what to say to the media at what time, when, and all that. So that those technical issues she didn't know. When she was asked, because of course, when you're moving from one regime to that, understanding what you've done, you want change. Election is about change to the next. Change must be new. There's no change that is constant. So the change from Harris to from Biden to another regime, because people were looking for change. She was not representing change. When asked what she would do differently from Biden, she basically said she didn't see anything that she would have done differently.
Yeah.
And you see that doesn't represent change. It remains a constant. Even food, whether it's the best food, whether it's rice, it's meat, it can be boring. It comes a time when you don't want to eat the same food. Just that change is important. Of course, that change is as good as a rest. So, because she didn't represent the change, another 10 years, for instance, or 5 years, was going to be toxic. And monotonous. Monotonous.
Yeah.
So, to that extent alone, she basically dropped down what was probably a slim lead at that time.
What do you see in Trump's administration for the next 4 years?
It's going to be dramatic. I personally looking forward. I love it. You're never bored with Trump, ever. The good and the bad is going to be a cocktail of the same.
Yes.
Because he does not just act. I think he pronounces himself in the action. So he doesn't mince words. Whether he likes this, he likes it. He doesn't like it.
Yeah.
And then he pushes us to whatever result. For instance, I expect we have now the International Convention on Climatic Change. I expect that he is going to whittle down probably the prominence of climate and the fact that it is an issue that's prominently affecting the world today. Yeah. He doesn't believe in that or has no passion for climate issues completely. He has himself pronounced in that, and that he doesn't behave different from the way he pronounces himself. In matters, Gaza, I think, is going to be decisive on stopping it. He's not the president now, obviously. He's just an elect. But when he comes to power, we expect that he's going to put into place, policies and international, probably administrative initiatives to stop it. Also, Ukraine. The character is quite domineering in the world. So when he says this has to stop, it's a pronouncement you can't ignore. Okay. And he will say it anytime, anyhow. The last, I think, about the good about him is criticism is never an issue to fear. So the fear of saying this and eliciting criticism.
He'll pick it and run with it.
Beauty is you will not get something else from what you see.
Yeah.
So yes, African policy, I doubt there's much. He's a pure capitalist. Work for yourself, get your own money, but don't look for donations.
He's never had that soft spot and a soft heart for Africa.
He's a Puritan in terms of his approach for even the American society. He wants it white. He would rather it remains the way it is, but he thinks the Caucasians, Africans, and other people, when they come there, they adulterate the society, and therefore taking away the would-be gains or resources that will be shared there. Everyone looks at it that way. I mean, South Africa, there has been quite a problem there with other black people, xenophobic, and it goes everywhere. The discomfort of a foreigner coming to your turf in terms of dominion happens. Yeah. Even a dog, back in the village, if you go there and you're not, the owner or a person who is dominantly there, and you're a foreigner or a visitor, he barks at you. Yeah. Sometimes he chases you away. That's dominion. So the character of dominion is such that people would want to retain theirs as much as possible and would abhor or would do not want other people to come to share the resources that are there. It's normal for any character. The wars that we fight in this world are because of land, because of dominion and jurisdiction, and what will be probably in the mind.
Even back home now, even President William Ruto actually called him last week, and he said that they discussed areas of mutual interest for Kenya and United States, including trade and security, among others. He also briefed Trump on the ongoing security support mission in Haiti, which is being led by Kenya, among other areas of cooperation. So, yeah, President William Ruto has already put his call to him, and we expect to see what is going to happen. Let's come back home and talk about matters za nyumbani sasa.
On matters Haiti, for instance, the problem we have there is, you see, when he says American first, honestly, he has no business supporting the Haitians, because that's charity, almost like charity. It's an international obligation, but honestly, he has no business helping. Now, he will do it if the American interest, for instance, is protected? Is there a drug issue involved?
Is it affecting America directly?
Yes. If there is, then he'll look into it in terms of his policy of American first. If it isn't, then we have to bring our brothers home, send our KQ and get them home. Because you see, that whole packaging is, at the center of it, is US funding it. We even have problems there as we speak, as at yesterday. I think they sacked their prime minister and put another one for the council that's leading the country on account of the politics, the turmoil of politics. But looks like there's a surge of the gang violence as at yesterday. There was really good big fighting there. So if we don't get the weaponry, we don't get the ammunition, we don't get the resources, because we can't give our own from here, it's not even enough, then we have to bring our boys home. And we can't endanger the lives of our brothers and sisters who are there. So yes, it depends on what he says. What he says is then affects us. That's why if America coughs, we have to catch the sneeze, the flu. On account of the fact, if America sneezes, even if it sneezes, we have to feel the effect, the ripple effect. Because if it says it's not going to deal with Haiti, that's it. We have to make decisions on our own.
What do you make of what's on the front page of the Standard? Home of Washwash cleaners. That's on the front page of the Standard. Remember what former CS Matiang'i said in as far as he spoke about some members of parliament that the country would be dominated by Washwash and all manner of criminals. But now Standard says that home of Washwash cleaners, a government report points to a worrying trend where money launderers have found a safe haven. The rise in suspicion, financial transactions over the past 2 years shows that there is a multi-billion shillings illicit trade and is not thriving but putting the economy under pressure. Are you surprised?
Well, there has always been the trend of foreign direct investments, purportedly or genuinely, where money has to come from out of this country for purposes of building the country, projects and so on and so forth. Now, you need to protect the economy, because the mere fact that a lot of money is coming into the country does not mean that the country is going to grow or that money is going to be used here. So it has to be a balance on the influx. That which comes is balanced with the needs of the country, to balance especially the shilling as against the dollar. Now, why this becomes a concern is because then also part of this money could support illicit activities such as terrorism, such as drugs, and so on and so forth. There is an institution that sieves, looks through all monies that is coming, especially money of a certain amount, where then you have to justify the projects that are going to be done here, and the money is traceable to the person and personalities. Some money, of course, looking at the path that it has taken, is suspected. The banks also have obligation to report any financial activities that look suspicious, especially a certain amount. Even if you don't report that, it can be traced, the amount can be traced within the economy and probably can be investigated. Now, to say that money has come and it's allowed, it's because then it means that the tools that are put into place to check on that are either not working or are compromised. Suffice it to say, therefore, that it is important that it's not a celebration that money comes here. It actually can destroy our economy completely. So whatever comes in here, one, must be to steady the economy. It must come in an amount that is commensurate of this magnitude of the economy. We are not, we are still a growing economy and a very small economy comparable to the world. Number two is we can destroy our country very easily because when money comes here and is used for illicit business, such as terrorism and drugs, we harm our economy. And lastly, money in itself is useless unless it helps to develop, sustain the quality of life for the people. So it must be seen to do exactly that. It is not just money to be present, money to be able to develop, bring jobs, and especially bridge the gap between the poor, the have and the have-nots. That becomes money that is important to the country, but just not money that is brought for purposes of probably acts that will be harmful to the economy and to the country and the people of the country. Yep.
Okay. On the front page of this Daily Nation, plum job for 6 billion shillings oil scam suspect. I'm talking about one lady, Lucy Anangwe, and she was mentioned in the oil scandal, and now there's a probe into the by actually Trade Cabinet Secretary Salim Mvurya, who is on the spot for allegedly influencing the appointment of Lucy Anangwe as the managing director of the Kenya National Trading Corporation, despite being adversely mentioned in the 6.5 billion shillings edible oil scandal. So Ms. Anangwe appointment comes despite an advisory from KNTC board chairperson Hussein Debasso. But here she is now, the managing director. In as much as there is a case, I know you'll say that until proven guilty.
Well, that's not the province of the Constitution, unfortunately. It's true that you are presumed innocent until proven guilty. That is one. But there's character. There's a character element put in the Constitution that we need to check before a person's appointment. The content of character will be how the person has presented himself to the public, which the public has consumed. And that's why public participation is important, because then the public expresses itself in matter of the character content on how the public has associated itself with the character of the person to be appointed. So Article 10 of the Constitution creates the distinct issues to be checked when a person gets into office. That read with the fullness of Chapter 6, the integrity issues that are there. I do think that it was put there for purposes of pre-issues before, that is matters before appointment. The pre-issues that come out are to be looked at in the, to express the character of the content of character of the person. And therefore the judgment here on whether a person should assume office or not should be the content of character expressed by the public. That's how the Constitution has repackaged the whole issue of whether you are into appointment or not necessarily on one of the issues being whether you are convicted of a crime or not. So one of the issues, yes, were you convicted of a crime or not, you look at that. After that, then you look at the content of character in terms of how people are going to reply to the character of the person who is proposed for appointment. So pre-appointment issues. The appointment issues are different because then it's how you behave, whether you misuse public money and so on and so forth. But the pre-appointment issues are the ones that are put in the Constitution. Conviction for a crime in this country is a pre-appointment issue. And the content of character itself, as you put across, is a pre-appointment issue. Not to look at pre-appointment issues is to breach the Constitution. And therefore, yes, it's actionable and the courts may stop it. They have done that before. That an appointment becomes unavailable to a person because of past conduct and behavior, notwithstanding that the person has not been convicted, is an issue.
Now, being mentioned in the 6.5 billion shillings edible oil scandal, is that enough to stop somebody from appointed to this position?
Yes and no. Yes, because it's a pre-appointment issue. Why does the public then have to express itself in terms of public participation and giving their views? That's a pre-appointment issue. And therefore, yes, the public has to say it's not everything that has been mentioned associated with a person becomes an issue that bars the person of taking the appointment, because then there are institutions that do the investigation. For instance, there's DCI can give a report, NIS can give a report, ESCC can give a report, and Parliament can give a report. So when that report is given, then the measure and content of participation or adulteration of that character becomes more important. How close or how proximate was the person to the issue at hand that is offensive to the public, and that becomes important. So it's not always to say he didn't talk well, his language was foul, and so on and so forth. He didn't appear well on this day, he was drunk.
So you should not be given that position on that basis.
Yes, so it's how the content of the offense to the public in terms of whether the person can hold in trust of that office for the public, won't bring the office to public odium or or will abuse the office, or his presence in that office doesn't look to demean the office.
Let's take a break. When you come back, I want us to talk about the issue of 2027. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is still seen as a big influence in the mountain, and how is mountain going to react to some of the issues being raised? I'm also informed that some of the MPs are finding it so hard in their backyard because of that impeachment. We'll take a look at that shortly when you come back. Stay with us. Perfect. So let's talk about politics for the next 30 minutes. When former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua was impeached, he had that clarion call to the mountain, my people, watu wangu, watu wa mlima. And that statement perhaps did not go down very well with many people, but we all know the kind of weight Mount Kenya plays or carries when it comes to election. They vote as a bloc. There's no doubt about that. And any political leader who wants to be the president of this country must look at the mountain. Now, let's take a look at this situation here, Wakili. So he's out. Do we have a kingpin? Much as nobody really wants to talk about, we have kingpin of this region and this and that, but that's one reality that we cannot run away from.
Yeah, you're right. You're right, because how human being is organized is such that the element and perception of security is a dominant issue in the mind of a human being. So at birth and growth, the parents seemingly will provide for that environment. As you grow out into society, you then assume identities through and through. The identity of your family, where you come from, the area and region where you come from becomes an issue of content of your character in terms of how people look at you, and the ethnicity and the skin color, many other things that characterize you as you grow up, because then you reveal yourself as you grow to the public, and that becomes common of you and the people around you. So there is then the hegemony and characterization in terms of clan, ethnicity, all the way until the country. Now you're a Kenyan, you're wherever you are. When that happens, the social environment is not taken away from the needs. The needs are, you need security. So you need someone you look up to for purposes of your normal political organization, social organization, economic organization, and how you protect yourself. So it is not enough that the government exists and therefore protects you. No, you socialize yourself in a certain way.
There has to be an individual.
Yes, and that then springs out character dominions over certain people, over the people, because of how they talk, how they behave in the society. So you'll have then people consult for certain things. Even witchcraft gets consulted for rain and for what and for what. Now, there's no society whatsoever, or people of a society, that won't need chieftains. The tribal chieftains, they'll always exist for as long as tribes exist. Now, tribes cannot, probably in future will exist on account of wealth, because the golfers who have their own wealth, they're gated communities in certain leafy suburbs in this country and even in other countries. And obviously that is to protect and self-determine and self-preserve. There must be a kingpin. There must be a tribal chieftain in any society. And that comes in many ways. One of it is, how has this person struggled for us? How has he fought for us? So yes, there's an emerging character of dominion in Rigathi Gachagua to the Mlima. It is not yet there. I think what Mlima has done so far, the people of Mlima have probably sympathized with him. The empathy element has not yet settled, because once you get involved in the empathy element, and therefore you conquer and dominate on a people. When you conquer and dominate is when you become conquer and dominate. Whatever you say, the people follow. One of the elements probably I can give as an example is Nyanza,
yes,
where Raila Odinga has managed to conquer and dominate the population there, because whatever he says is a character issue that has to be dominant. Conquer is what will give birth to the tribal chieftain or the leader or the kingpin. The only way to do it is through influence in the manner in how you fight for the people and you suffer for the people. And number two is when you have wealth as a promise to distribute to the people, or for gain or perception of gain as a character dominant to the people. So it's more about how you fight for the people in terms of the dominion that you exert on them to protect them, but also a wealth character ordinarily that you express over the people and how you share the wealth.
Why is that region quite key in determining in 2027?
Well, that region remains important because of numbers. Numbers and what they hold in union in terms of the economics. Like I've said, politics is about the numbers you represent, but also the wealth that comes with it. Investments in this country, if you look at it from the ethnic distribution, a lot of the most important investments, especially financial institutions, can be traced to central Kenya. And therefore, in terms of how they get organized in matters, wealth becomes a dominant issue to be looked at. Campaigns have to be funded. And therefore, the people behind the funding probably are the kingmakers. So you look at it that way. Number two is the numbers that they hold. So far, they hold as many numerically on account of the fact that they can influence the pattern of voting. So it's either the government or they influence the government, the formation of government, meaning they contribute to the outcome more largely. There's more dominantly in how they contribute to the outcome of any election. And therefore you can't basically ignore that. It has been the constant after independence to date. In this country, therefore, democracy is influenced by numbers, because that's what democracy says. The more the numbers, the predictable the results anywhere in this world, and therefore in Kenya. So the more the numbers, therefore the more the influence, because of the perception of the outcome, or would be influence of the outcome by how organized they are to influence the outcome. Because
does this statement really resonate with them? That if you are a leader of all Kenyans, running away from the issue of you're a kingpin and all that, and of course you correctly put it, that in a certain community they'll have to look for a certain personality who will represent their case in terms of the security, the economic desires, and etc, etc. But in this case, we can say they don't have that person they can run to or they can look up to. How will this affect any person who will run to them and say, you know what, I'm here today because I'm going to represent you in the next 5 years after election?
If you do not have that personality, and I think many communities don't look at it because of their internal competition. Yes, it has to be a competitive issue for the best to emerge. If you don't have that personality, you are exposed. You're exposed in how you bargain in society. This is how government works. There is the government organized within a certain geographical fiefdom, where there are boundaries, where people have to live within those boundaries. In those boundaries, you organize in a certain system that is put in place by laws. So the laws will say, don't do this, you do this, do's and don'ts, which is fine. But the actual life you live is influenced by decisions made by men and women, few of them staying somewhere and making decisions in some boardrooms, and in the manner in how they pronounce themselves and carry themselves during the day. Those people come from somewhere. They come from a place that has a community. And therefore the resource mobilization is a pull towards you. So there's a pot that has every resource, of course spread all over the country, but the decision making is from purportedly in that pot, from the money and the resources all over. Now you need to pull out enough for yourself or for your community every time. The struggle for resources, therefore, is about how much you can get to your community, about the roads, about the water, about schools, and about all that. So budgeting process is a competitive process for every community to be able to get as most for itself. And that's what leadership is. But you see, the communities where they are represented by a certain number of members of parliament, 2 of them, sometimes 6, sometimes dominating parliament. Those decisions are made there. But ultimately, whatever parliament says, somebody has a pen and a paper to propose to parliament what government will do. And therefore, that person seated there comes from somewhere else. And in terms of budgeting, that person then puts in place the resource mobilization and resource distribution that then favors or disfavors some other places. Equity is equity, in the mind and in theory. But in actual sense, whatever money is distributed by a human being. The money that has been sent to counties by national government, that money has been sent there by a person who puts an active, who acts in a certain way that money moves to those counties. Now, there are certain areas where employees and workers of counties have not been paid, doctors have not been paid, because somebody hasn't sent money there. And that becomes important. And money can be sent the last minute, 2 days, 3 days, 2 weeks, to the end of the financial year, such that you can't do anything with it, because then it has to come back to for reallocation. Now, that becomes important because the day-to-day management is done by people. And that's why you need a person of your own for purposes of resource mobilization or actively acting for you. And that's how society is designed. The equilibrium and the ideal will be you act in a manner that those facets and fiefdoms of communities don't exist. They do. And the human natural bias to make decisions is always a content of the character of a human being, whoever it is. That's why even today, Jesus died as a Jew, and the Jews have dominance in their mention in the Bible. And we can't take away that. Suffice it to say that how human being is organized is that he then must come from a certain place, and it is expected that for the good and ideal of it is that when our own is at the decision-making table, the kingpin, we get what we want, or there's a perception that we are endowed towards getting resource mobilization our way.
How important is Rigathi Gachagua right now, even out of politics?
My take is this. He is important because of the manner in which he has marketed himself as a spokesperson or a person who always talks about the character of his people. That's Mlima. 2 is, had he been given more time in the position he was, in the manner in which he was marketing his policies and politics, his perception and his connection with his people, he will have gotten to an extent where probably he will be the driver and mobilizer of his people, and therefore the kingpin. Having been cut short in the environment in which that will have spurred his positioning as a kingpin, I do believe that he will enjoy that traction for now because of the proximity to the issues that happened. But as time moves on, you wear out the dominion. It is then somebody else who has more influence, either in government or whatever character that he brings, takes over slowly. And
so it's upon him now to keep the momentum.
Yes, and he has to keep the momentum without the character definition that he had over deputy president. If he does that, which was inexpensive then, and was characterized by the power that he was holding at that time. Without that power, and with now personal resources to be used in that mobilization.
How would he do that to deter the other person who would come, to influence?
He can't. He could at that time because he was mobilized in a certain manner as to attract power and the tools of protection that insulate him. The police, right now he doesn't have those tractions. Because he doesn't have. Slowly, the content of mobilization as was then has dissipated. Further forward and away from the incident, which is 8 months, 1 year, and so on and so forth, obviously, then he is far away from the sympathy that he had. And remember, sympathy is contextual. It can only be as close as possible to the issue. That's why when my father passed on, I was very sad. And I cried the same day. I'm not crying today. Because that time we call it healing. But obviously it's a walk away from the incident on account of the content of things that come after that. So we as close as possible to the incident, we associate with the incident because of the memory and the human personality
and the stronger sympathy.
But after that, I think people walk away. So I can tell you this, Gachagua has to really work hard to get Mlima now than he was working before, because they move on. And yes, Kenyans, as I said last time, are very good at voicing themselves on an issue. The shelf life in Kenya is just 1 week or 2 weeks, and you move on. That's shelf life. So if the shelf life of news as to impeachment becomes a historical issue after some time. So it's not history now because we have proximity to the incident, but it becomes historical after some time. When it becomes historical, it means it's in the past. Why
haven't we moved away from talking about former president?
Yes, because of proximity of the incident. I tell you, it's not historical because it is as close as possible.
Former President Uhuru Kenyatta with the mountain, the association.
No, we have. We have, but it's because, you see, the issue is as big as a presidential issue. We have just moved 3 years from his 10 years. So you can see that the content has not been covered up. His effect is still being felt because of the fact that he had 10 years of dominion. We have had 3 years of someone else's dominion who took over. 10 years of William Ruto, if you look at the 10 years of Uhuru Kenyatta, will be 20 years completely. Then the dominion, the psychic dominion to the people of Kenya will be that of William Ruto. We only have probably now historical issues as to Kibaki. It will get there with Uhuru Kenyatta. It will also get there with William Ruto, and so on and so on. That's how it is. Unless something is written for us to read, to be honest, we move on as a people. And that's the beauty about a human being. So yes, we will move on, and the people of Mlima will move on. And again, Mlima has never lacked. It has never lacked characters that can exercise dominion over the people. And it's not true that there's no competition for Rigathi Gachagua. There is competition. There was competition for Uhuru Kenyatta. There was competition for Kibaki. There is still competition in Mlima. There are many characters that would emerge and would also want to exercise dominion over that community. So one day, at a point, we will see, and it will pass, whether he continues to then, because of that, he continues to exercise dominion and over the people, or alternatively that someone else come to take over the dominion of the people of Mlima.
When you look at Honorable Kalonzo Musyoka having that close, the friendship, let me call it, at this particular point with the former deputy president, and all attention is now focused to the mountain, will it have any sense of balance come 2027? Because probably Kalonzo Musyoka said that he's now the active opposition leader of the other side of Azimio, now that Raila Odinga is also eyeing for another position somewhere else. Will it affect how things will change in 2027?
The act of God is a dominant act which all of us can't do anything about. So if it is written that the leader of opposition will be Kalonzo Musyoka, it is written in heaven. But I've never seen it myself. I have not seen that written. Neither have I had any vision that he's the opposition leader as we speak. You see, there are many opportunities, and we're having this discussion because there are many opportunities that have given Kalonzo Musyoka a blanket check to take either government or to take over as a dominant character in politics of Kenya. He hasn't taken that, or he has not been seen as a serious contender. This time round, maybe he's matured enough over the many years that he's been in politics such that he can take over that. We pray for him that he can, because we need opposition in this country. But what are his tools of opposition? What are his tools? He's not in parliament, he's not anywhere. Number two is you need to have people that are faithful. The tools of trade in politics are the people. The tools of trade, therefore, must be such that they are emotionalized enough. At your beck and call, they can react. Raila Odinga has achieved that. It's a faith that he has achieved, no other person has. So Kalonzo Musyoka today calls for a demonstration, and we are not going to be very passionate, for the reason that he has not himself appealed to the people in the manner as to robustly organize them to a certain destination. Having said so, therefore, yes, you can voice yourself as a leader of opposition. Call yourself anything, because what's in a name anyway? But the actual organic organization of the people, like you organize them such that they feel you and emotionalize them. Who is he going to organize? Okay, certainly it's not the entire Eastern. Certainly it's not Mlima. He can pronounce himself in Mlima and say, okay, tomorrow we are going for a demonstration, and they come out. They won't. So what is it that he needs? And therefore it means he is not the dominant character that is going to replace the dominant character of Raila Odinga as the leader of opposition. He will not get there. The fanfare of it, he can speak, but to be honest, he won't get there. The shoes that have been left by Raila Odinga in the opposition zone obviously cannot be filled by Kalonzo Musyoka. Yeah. He comes out as more as a supporter. You know that people who are made to support others, but for themselves to come out and get supported, it's a risk, political risk, to support Kalonzo Musyoka if you want some political dominion. But I can't say this. He has constantly himself lived up to the politics of the day by playing second fiddle or third fiddle, whatever it is. So his party gets people into parliament, he gets people into Senate, he gets some governor here and there, and MCS. And that keeps him going politically. The robust competitiveness, which is a proper friction of politics, if you look at the presidential candidature of William Ruto and Kalonzo Musyoka, at the ballot, he won't be able to beat William Ruto. Obviously, because William Ruto has gone through probably the more robust processes to become president. So he will need Mlima if he organizes himself, but please still play second fiddle, because what is he bringing to Mlima? What actually is he bringing? There are no numbers that would probably complement or surpass the numbers.
Do you think they've learned their lesson? Well, I know you said that Kenya's shelf life is only 2 weeks.
Yes.
But this one hit so hard.
I think if the lessons to be learned, it is on the issue of interest. These countries, if your interest is threatened, then you arise probably to a certain alertness, which is what Mlima did. But if those interests are addressed, that alertness becomes compromised, because then you have your interests checked. So it's a country that is very capitalist in the manner in which it organizes itself. So it's a question of the pockets of interest all over, harnessed together and managed. So if your interests are threatened, of course, then your alertness as to the way you get disturbed in your orientation becomes important. But further forward, if your interests are taken care of, you have no problem. So at the cost, if the port is seemingly, the activity of the port are moved to Naivasha, then there's noise. Is there noise now? There's no noise, because the port seemingly, perhaps by way of words, has been restored to Mombasa, and activities of clearing and forwarding for the people there and other issues at the port are done at Mombasa. So there was noise at that time, and it stopped. And the threat was addressed. And therefore, the alertness is not at the highest, and similarly to
And the president, if at all he would want to run for a second term, knows very well that he cannot avoid or ignore the mountain.
The knowledge is important. To avoid is a different issue. The knowledge that he can't avoid them, they'll behave in a certain way, is important. Because remember, at a point in this country, there was the question, a bad question, but a question of 1 versus 47. Yes. That narrative was there. And it wasn't a very good one, because we ended up with bitter memories. Point is, it depends on how you manage it. Now, the divisive politics, unfortunately, is the character of democracy. Democracy is such that you must divide yourselves for purposes of biases, to vote for someone and not to vote for someone. That's what democracy is. How do you bias yourself? Ethnically, yes. Any other division, such as color, yes, you can. You can bias yourself on religion. And there's nothing wrong with that, and nobody can prohibit that. And therefore, there's nothing wrong with ethnic mobilization for election. And when do you ethnically mobilize for election? Any day. Even now, you can start campaigning ethnically mobilized for purpose of getting into power. And there's nothing wrong with that. And the freedom of association assembly is available for anyone. And therefore, to say we should the ethnic decibels must be lowered is a good thing. But in practical terms, I don't think we can achieve that.
Yeah.
Because obviously it is the divisions that gives birth to leadership, those kingpins that we talk about. And also, it is the divisions that mobilize resources to the fiefdoms of division that we create.
Okay.
And therefore, divide is important for purpose of leadership.
My last question to you, what has been your highlight since we met last week? What has happened out there that perhaps Kenyans do not know?
I think the most important thing for me will probably be the elections, the outcome of the election. I was surprised. I thought Trump had a good chance, a fair chance to win, but not with that margin. And I think it's important to know that in election, it's not done until it's done. So surprises would always be there. It's important, therefore, that to reorganize society, you have to speak to the people in what they want to hear. And be seen to be a character that will solve solutions and not create more problems. Number two, you must represent change if you have to get into leadership. It's basically a cry for all the people that we are suffering now. We're in a democracy. After a certain period of time, we will deal with this issue at the ballot. And therefore, we will have this prospect and the hope for better. That is probably the most important part about democracy. That there's hope and a determination of a term where a new term will come, where there's change. I have said it, and probably I repeat, change must be new. If change is new, then it means the people who come are new. If you're already in leadership and you want to come again, you must still represent change within the context of your leadership. That this is what you've done, we are going to upscale what you've done in a certain manner.
Perfect. Isn't that a better way to wrap the show? I mean, just imagine change. I like the way you put it. Everything must be about change. And if you have that positive attitude about anything, that change will also be seen. Thank you so much, Wakili.
Thank you.
George Kithi, for joining me on the show. We've done 1 hour. That has been a very good show. Thank you so much for joining us. We're taking a break, but GMK continues shortly after this. I'm Victor Lowe. Good morning.